Hello everybody. In this recording, I'm going to cover while loops. So a while loop is very similar to the for loop that the for loops that we cover in the previous lesson, except in a while loop, you're going to do the same. You're going to loop around, loop around, loop around while a condition is met. And that condition is reflected in the form of a Boolean, meaning a logical value. In a logical value, a Boolean value is either true or false. True or false. So while you do a test and the test is going to result in either true or false, while it is true, while the test is true, you will loop around in a set of commands and come back and test it again, test it again, test it again, while that test is true. When the test is false, then you can break and get out of the loop. There's another way to get out of the loop with a break function. But for now, I want to cover the fundamental while loop. So I'm going to loop while the test is true, right? This is very useful in many functions, in artificial intelligence and functions that deal with many iterations, and you don't know how long you're going to go because you're looking for a certain condition, a certain function that will reach a plateau meaning a certain range. When you're looking for a gap and you want to reduce a gap, minimize something, there are many areas that you will be applying the while loops at some point. They're not as popular as the for loops. The for loops come up all the time, and that is because we like to iterate over lists of data that arrive, and you want to crunch through that data, right? The data are pieces of information that you want to crunch through as it arrives, or when you get data. And so the for loops are quite popular. When you look at a program, you're going to find many for loops throughout a program, and not so many while loops. But the while loops are extremely important. When you need them, you really need them. So they'll show up. Important to learn. It is important to learn. So to do that, I'm going to go over an example, right? And I'm going to point you to a few references so you can also learn on your own and investigate. Ultimately, the way you learn to write Python, since it is a language, you learn it through practice. So you're going to need to either open your own Jupyter notebook, like I do right here, or you can use Spider or another tool. So you go to Anaconda, for example, right? And this is not the only source of doing this. And launch Jupyter Lab, which is what I'm showing. And inside Jupyter Lab, you have Jupyter Notebook and a few other features that I will be exposing as we go through these lessons. And there is Jupyter Notebook by itself, or Spider, and a few other tools. Again, I'm not too interested in covering all about the tools, rather about the while loops in this lesson. All right, so Jupyter Notebooks are nice and simple. So on the first cell that I have here, I created a new Jupyter notebook, and I call it CEIS lesson 3.2 while loops, right? Right before I did lesson 3.1 for loops. Okay, if you were in my lesson yesterday, I renamed it. I had an extra character here in the name of this file. I renamed it. So just to let you know, in case you have a link, and I will make corrections on Canvas to make sure you all have these links. And you have the while loops. And by the way, everything you can find under my GitHub. I already uploaded this one. I'm going to upload it at the end of this lesson again. And you can find it under my GitHub, as you know, and I'm sharing my GitHub with everybody. Okay, so this is for the class, for this class. So there is your while loops. You're going to see all of that in here. So I'm going to run this first cell. It's a markdown cell. It's for documentation purposes only. and it all has the name of the cell. And I have two references. So the first one is your standard python.org reference. That's the one, that's your first reference you should go to. Then I have a second reference, which is Geeks for Geeks. I use for Geeks not only, I use Stack Overflow as well. Those are my two go-to online technical communities for software. I find them to be very useful. I like Stack Overflow when there are discussions and people put a lot of information, people ask a question and you answer it. It's similar to our discussions in class. I like Stack Overflow a lot. I like Geeks for Geeks to find examples, quick examples. So let me show you first the first references. The first reference, which is the python.org. I have it already open right here. And the while statement, the way they cover it is very simple, very down to the point. It's pretty much the syntax that goes with it. You use the colon like we did in the for loop, and you can do an else, and this is more like just the raw syntax. They don't show you any example. So therefore, I'm sharing with you the Geeks for Geeks, where they cover the while loops, and they do a very good job. They show a flow chart where at the beginning you do a test of the expression, whether it's true or false, and you keep going through the loop, running a bunch of statements, and you get out of the loop as soon as the condition is false. If the condition is true, you stay in the loop. If it's false, you get out of the loop. That is the graphics. And then they show a few examples, right? They're very nice examples. I'm not going to repeat the same examples. You can come back here and run the examples. You can come back here and do a copy and paste, like copy this by clicking here, and then go to your Jupyter Notebook and paste. I'm not going to do it. I'm just showing you this is what you can do, and so forth. So that's very nice. So the other thing that I'm going to do to demonstrate the my example that I'm going to create here for you on the fly is I'm going to create a random number. A random number is a number that comes in random. So the one I'm going to create is going to be between 0 and 1, just a random number, right? And what I like to do is say I'm going to get a random number, boom, get the random number, and go inside the loop. I'm going to test if that random number, while that random number, say, is smaller than, say, 0.9. I'm not going to do 0.5 because I'm 50-50. I'm going to do, while my random number is below 0.9, I'm going to stay in the loop, and I'm going to run another random number. I'm going to print something and say, hey, I'm in the loop, and run it again, and test it again, and see if that random number is above 0.9 or equal to 0.9, or if it is below 0.9. So I'm going to keep on going and going and going until it's below 0.9. It automatically will get out, just like it shows here. So that's what I'm going to do in this chart. So it's going to go through. That's what I'm going to do. So therefore, I need to talk about random numbers. So there are various ways to generate a random number. So there is a library called Pandas that we will be covering in more detail. But I want to spend a lot more time on Pandas introduction itself. It's perhaps the most powerful library in Python. It's called Pandas, like the panda bear. Yeah. All right. Instead of using Pandas, I'm going to use random, right? In fact, when you go here to the, when you start exploring about how they present the while loop in some of this literature, they go into the random number. So there is a function here called random, but it requires a library. So I haven't spoken about libraries yet, right? In Python, Python depends or utilizes many libraries that people build on and share, and they get tested in the community. So maybe that's one of the reasons that Python is so popular. And it's not the only language that does this, but they very much do it. And so random is one of those that was implemented, and there is some more literature right here. I'm going to copy and paste this link to the random number. But it says here it requires this library. So basically, in this explanation, it assumes that you know about libraries. And I haven't presented libraries, so I'm going to introduce you this. It's going to be your first library. In fact, in the lab and in class, they're going to be introducing other libraries. But here, in this while loop lesson, I'm going to introduce one. So when you use a library, and you need a library when you're going to run a function, a command, which is really a function behind it, or it could be a class. We'll get into those details of semantics. But you're going to run a command, say for now, in Python that is not native to Python, right? That it is not one of the built-in functions in Python. Therefore, you depend on importing a library. So we're going to import, and in this case, we're going to import random. Now, when you import something and you use it, you need to use a prefix and then dot and then the name of a function that is part of that library. In this case, the function that I'm going to use is the function random, which is in the random library, which sounds redundant, but you have a function random that has many functions, one of which is random. So let me explain it in this way. So if you go to the random function right here, you see random, and then you see a dot, and then you see seed, because seed is a function inside the random library. There is another function getState. I'm not going to use those functions. Those are for you over time to learn how they work if you need them. For now, I just want to generate a random number, but I need to explain this so that you see why I'm calling a random number. So when I import random, right, the name of the library that I imported is random. When I use a function inside, I have to specify which function I use. In this case, it sounds redundant, but the name of the function that I will use is also random. So I have to type random.random, and then it's going to generate a number between 0 and 1. And I can do other things with random. There are other functions. I'm not going to cover that right now. It's not the objective. If you want to learn more about random, I also have your Geeks for Geeks that covers the random module, or the random library, random module. And here are all of the functions underneath the random function, and one of them is called random. So when you call it, and you're going to see it here, you're going to import random first, which is what I'm going to do. Then when you use the libraries, the functions from random, you have to again say random dot and then the function inside random. There are commercials here, ignore that. And here, therefore, when you run a random number, you have to say random, okay? Random, and so here are the outputs. The first one is a random number between 0 and 1. You get 0.62 and then 0.74. So now you see a background on random, okay? I'm gonna use the same notation. There is a way to, instead of writing the whole word random, I can make it smaller when I do import random as something like RD. So I don't have to type random. So, but I'm going to keep it the same way as it's right here. What I just said about making the prefix smaller is something that I will cover within the next few lessons. It's right now just to make you aware. Instead of typing random, I could type something like rd.random, but I have to tell my program that instead of saying random, I'm going to say as RD. And then from now on, I just type RD dot the function in random. But for now, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to let you know that there are other things I can do here to refine my code. I'm going to leave it simple the way it comes. I'm going to use it the way Gigs for Gigs use the random number generator. And so let's go and do it. In fact, before I enter my command, I'm going to document with a little comment to do this random, so you have a link to it, and I'm going to put a second link to the Gigs for Gigs. I know that there's commercials in there. They look funny. Anyway, so you have the documentation, and every comment, as you know, this is a code cell, so I need to put a £sign to document it, to let it know that's not a Python command. So I'm going to run this, and it's going to bring in my random. It's going to import the random so I can run the commands. So here I can demonstrate it by saying random, and then I'm running the module that I just imported, this, and I'm going to, within that module, run the function random. Got it? Just like it says right here. Once you start doing this on your own, it's going to be second nature. Right now you may be scratching your heads. What is all this random and all that? You really need to follow what I'm doing using your own computer. All right, so see, I run it, and it created a random number. I can run it again. The beautiful thing about Jupyter Notebook, I can run these cells many times. This one is 0.01, another number. Let's go back to that cell, run it again. This time is 0.5, right in the middle. Let's run it again, 0.411, run it again. So every time I run it, I get a different number. Okay? There is no pattern. It's a very uniform. When you run it 1,000 times, you will notice that it's very uniform. Should be averaging at 0.5. And there is 0.7, 0.8, 0.3. Okay, now we see our random number is working. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a value, a variable. I'm going to call it test. All right? And I'm going to say test is equal to random. So when I run test, I get a random number and I put it inside test. So I want to know what I got. All right. So just to see what my test is, I got 0.9. All right. If I run it again, I get 0.89. If I run it again, I get 0.66. Okay, fine. So now let's do a while loop. So I'm going to say, if you go to the syntax of the while loop, while, then the assignment expression, then the colon, and then all your commands. Or you can look at this right here. It says while, then your test, then colon, then whatever commands you want to enter. I'm going to do that here, but I'm going to do while, and I'm going to say while my test is smaller than 0.9, then I'm going to run a bunch of commands. I don't need to put it within parentheses. I can leave it like that. Notice the same thing, because within that while loop, I can have multiple commands. I need to know which commands are covered by those that I'm going to repeat that are covered within my loop. And the way to do that in Python is by indenting. So it automatically indented for me in my tool, right? So I'm going to say print test is equal to, and then I'm going to put the value of the test, and then I'm going to say you can leave it like that. Can leave it like that. So what you're going to see is it's going to be looping through this. Oh, and then I have to create a new test. And it's going to loop through this, and it's going to test. And when the test is larger than or equal to 0.9, it's going to get out. So I'm going to have to draw another random number. If the very first test was equal to 0.9 or above 0.9, it will not even execute anything. It will get out of the while loop immediately. So the seed number, I shouldn't call it a seed number. The first number that I start, in this case I have 0.66. I already tested it. But had it been equal to or above 0.9, this while loop will not execute anything. It will get out immediately. But let's say that it's getting in with 0.66. In fact, I can force my test to be equal to 0.5 just to make sure it goes in. I'll explain that in a second, and I'll modify this for you so that you can see what I mean. But for now, let's run this loop. Okay, so in this command right here, I have, I'm drawing another random number between 0 and 1, and I'm assigning it to test. So the loop comes back and it tests whether that new test is smaller than or equal to 0.9. And it's going to print the result, right? The minute that it is larger than or equal to 0.9, it's going to get out. And it's not going to print anything, it's just going to get out. And you'll know it got out because you're going to see it. It's not printing anymore. All right, so let's run it. Okay, so how many times did it run? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 times. Interesting. So on the 13th time, it got out. So how about if we do this? Print test, let's say coming in. Coming into the loop, right? And I'm going to print another one. Print new test to go back to the loop. Let's do that. And that's equal to, again, test. So my variable test changes. So I want to know what the new one is because you know what? I want to get more information here. All right. So let's do that. Okay. That is because it's already there. Let me. This is what I was saying earlier. I want to make sure I can get inside the loop. So to get inside the loop, I'm going to force my test to be 0.5. Let me not put it here. I'm going to put it on the next one. I'm going to put another command here. I'm going to say force my first test to be 0.5. So I'm going to say test is equal to 0.5. All right. So now I know that test is 0.5. So when I go inside my loop, then I go inside. Before, notice that I wasn't coming in the loop because it was already above 0.9. So right now, I force my test to be 0.5. Then it's obviously the first time around, it is below 0.9. It's 0.5 here, right? So it goes in and it says the test coming into the loop is 0.5, which is what I gave right here. Then I create a new test at a random and it's 0.217, blah, 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 blah. It tests it and it is still below 0.9 right there. Test coming into the loop. You went back into the loop. and it is below 0.9, so it goes back and generates another random number. This time it's 0.233. So I go back to the loop, and obviously 0.233 is below 0.9, so it runs through and says new test coming into the loop is 0.233, which we knew that would be because we just printed it right here, but that's okay. So I do another new test, 0.3824, and I keep on doing that and that and that and that, and until at this point, notice here, coincidentally, my new test here was 0.94. So 0.94 comes back and tests whether 0.94 is smaller than 0.9, and indeed, in fact, it's not involved. It's not smaller than 0.9. It's greater than 0.9. So then this test is false. This test is false. And when that test is false, it gets out of the loop. That's why I'm not any longer printing anything. It got out of the loop. In fact, let's do that test. I know what test value is 0.94 right now. Is test 0.94 smaller than 0.9? I'm just going to do the test here by itself, and the answer is false. And because it was false, right, that's the same test you did here, right? And that result is false, as you can see here on my demonstration. It is false, therefore it doesn't go through the loop. Just like the pictorial here from this one, from Geeks for Geeks, is the expression was false, so it doesn't go inside the loop. It exits the while loop. So that's it. That's the while loop for you all. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'll be talking to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.